What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, we're looking at free hit drafts for Double Gameweek 35. Now, earlier on today, I released a video that had Double Gameweek 35 and Blank Gameweek 36 content in it. In this one, we're going to be focusing around the free hit because I've got mine active. I'll still be doing the team selection video on Thursday, which will try and narrow down the draft a little bit more so it's a bit more concise. But in this one, I definitely want to do some tinkering, play around with my team, how it could look this week, especially for everyone else that's on 35 free hit as well. So we're going to talk about some of the teams to target, then get into tinkering. I'm fully aware that there's a lot of talk and speculation around Liverpool. Will they have a double? I'm going to touch on that in this video. I'm going to basically do tinkering without Liverpool because currently that's the info we have, and then tinkering with Liverpool just in case that announcement does get made, which could be quite late this week. Hopefully it will be before the deadline, but who knows at this point. So if you enjoy this type of video, please do give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you're new around here, and let's jump into it. So I've picked out some top teams that I will be looking to target, and they will really be the main focus of the drafts that not only do I tinker this week, but also, or tinker in this video, but also what it comes down to my final draft as well. Now, unfortunately, there's still more info that we need. Like, for example, that Man United-Liverpool game, when will that be rearranged? There's a maximum right now of 8 teams doubling, but if that game gets put into 36 and Liverpool move to 35, it means Liverpool and West Brom would then double in game week 35 as well. West Brom don't really come into the conversation for me because it's Arsenal away and Liverpool at home. Pereira could be good, right, on penalties, set pieces, etc. Very cheap, but outside of that, I wouldn't really be looking there. So these are the main teams I'm focusing on. I've put Liverpool in there because obviously if they do double, their fixture, Southampton at home and West Brom away, is about as good as it gets. And forget about Man United captains, Leicester captains, etc. It would be going straight on Salah, and I wouldn't even have to debate that in any single way. But that's just for me. Obviously, you wouldn't necessarily have to do that. Now, there's a lot of numbers on screen, so hopefully it's not too confusing. The numbers by the badges are the expected goals conceded per game average for this season. Now, obviously, I know not everyone likes stats. There is context that has to be taken around stats as well, but it's good to get a large sample size. Gives you a good indication of what that team's like. And then for the fixtures, I've got their XG and XGC, expected goals conceded, underneath the fixture. Right? So 1.32, 1.25 for Villa is 1.32 expected goals, 1.25 expected goals conceded. Okay, now that's kind of important. And like I said, context-wise, West Ham defence, for example, 1.16 isn't that bad. I mean, it's not great, but it's not that bad either. But obviously, they've not got Rice at the moment, and he is a big miss. So that's something to consider, right? I.e. context. So the 4 teams discounting Liverpool and Man United, Everton, Palace and Leicester. Now obviously when you look at stats as well, you've got to differentiate between whether a team is bad to target for goals or whether it's bad to target for clean sheets. So for example, right, Crystal Palace, their expected goals conceded is awful, 1.45. They are one of the worst defences in the league this season. If any team was playing Crystal Palace, they're not guaranteed goals, but they're a good team to target for FPL points and maybe even captaincy. But the 2 teams they're playing, Sheffield United away and Southampton away, their expected goals, so how good their attack is 0.73 for Sheffield United, absolutely awful, and Southampton is 0.93, which is still pretty poor. So although you wouldn't usually back Crystal Palace defence ever, right, at least going on this season, they are playing 2 fairly poor attacks. So potentially you could look to maybe go for a Guaita in goal, or perhaps a defender instead. And especially with Southampton having Danny Ings out as well. And looking at their expected goals conceded, 1.57 for Sheffield United and 1.23 for Southampton. Both defences aren't that great. So again, although Crystal Palace's attack over the season is poor, they've got 2 fixtures against 2 poor teams. You could look at an attacker like Benteke or Zaha instead. And we can have a look at their individual stats as well. With Leicester and Man United, and to a certain extent, Everton a bit. I'll talk about them in a sec. Like Leicester's first game against Newcastle was really good. Again, poor attack, poor defence, good team to target. With Man United, it's a little bit trickier because Man United's attack is fairly good, and apart from Liverpool, it's the best on this list. But the defence is quite good. So Iheanacho and Vardy are interesting options, even Maddison as well, because they play that Newcastle defence. It's pretty poor. You'd expect some points. And then they have the added bonus of the Man United game as well. But you don't necessarily expect something from that. Now, of course, Leicester attack isn't, they're not slouches by any means. So they will give Man United a tough time. But Man United's defence has been quite good again this year. Took a little while to get to that point. but he's been fairly decent. With Everton, and this is the problem with just putting one colour for the fixtures, because sometimes it's a good fixture for defence, but not for attack. With Everton, I actually think it's the other way around. Both West Ham and Villa attacks are quite good. 1.29 expected goals for West Ham, 1.32 for Villa. That's going to be tough for Everton to keep clean sheets, especially when their own numbers aren't that good. Obviously, one thing to say with Villa is they're missing Jack Grealish, but West Ham now have Antonio back, and that is huge. I still think Declan Rice will be a big plus for them, both in defence and attack, because they're more likely to have the ball right if he's playing. But I was quite impressed with watching West Ham against Burnley. With Antonio back in, it looks like a much more potent attack. So I would worry a little bit for clean sheets for Everton because the attacks are so good. But both those teams can see goals. So Calvert-Lewin, for example, could be good. James Rodriguez, Sigurdsson as punts, for example. You could also go for someone like Luka Dean, but I think if you go for someone like Luka Dean, you're hoping for attacking returns, and you've got like an outside shot of one clean sheet in one of the games, perhaps the Villa game if Grealish isn't back. So that's something I would look at. Obviously, Liverpool's great. They're playing 2 poor attacks and 2 poor defences as well. Obviously, Big Sam's made West Brom a little bit better, but not to the point where I would worry about targeting them. And then Man United have got a similar thing to Leicester. They're facing a poorish defence in Villa, an okay defence in Leicester, but both attacks are quite good, but Man United's defence is also pretty good. So someone like Luke Shaw, Harry Maguire could be good as well. So these are primarily where my teams or my players are going to come from, these teams, because either the team that I'm buying them from have strong stats, or the teams they're playing against have strong or weak stats, depending on how you want to look at it. So let's start doing the draft, and we'll start off without Liverpool. Okay, so let's start the tinkering, right? This is with no Liverpool. So this is the situation we're in right now, where there's 8 teams doubling, one of them's not Liverpool, etc., etc. We'll come on to Liverpool in just a second. I thought I'd start from scratch rather than just put up a team and say, yeah, this is the draft, here's why, job done, right? I've got a few ideas of players that are pretty much going to be in most drafts anyway, which I'm going to put in first. And I did do a draft that I put in the Patreon Slack as well. As soon as the game week passed, and I started thinking about the free hit, because I've kind of got a good idea of what I'm thinking about, but there's some players that could sway. I could be swayed on one way or another. So I do think I'm going to go for some Crystal Palace players, which I know seems mental, but as I just said, stats-wise, like I'm just looking at it again, Sheffield United away, Southampton away, pretty good fixtures. Look, I think with a free hit, you want to do some things that other people are not going to do. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to punt for kind of 11 to 15 absolute differentials that nobody's thought about. But if you can get the core players, plus some players that are big differentials that no one else is going to go for, or perhaps a limited amount of people are going to go for because they don't have the free hit, they're planning for future game weeks, then yeah, possibly they are the kind of players we should think about. So I think I'm going to go for Guaita in goal. Now, the other option really is Martinez, but they play Man United and Everton. Now, the problem with Martinez is if he gets one clean sheet, then he usually gets bonus or save points, one of the two, if not both. And then the other game almost becomes a bit of a bonus in itself, right? I think that happened in the last double game week. He played 2 teams. I think it was Leeds and someone else, and he got the clean sheet in the game we didn't expect. I think he got a clean sheet against Leeds, but not against Sheffield United. We expected it the other way around. He still came out with 12 points. So I wouldn't completely discount Martinez, but right now I'm thinking about Guaita just because of the attacks that he is playing aren't that great. The other option is Pickford for Everton, who I do think is a pretty good buy if you've not got the free hit, because it's Sheffield United at home, then Wolves in the league. But obviously, I'm only thinking for 1 week only. And West Ham away and the Villa away, they're both pretty good attacks, as we just discussed. So although I might look at an Everton player, it's more likely to be an attacker or Luka Dean rather than going for Pickford in goal. With Crystal Palace, there's not too many other defenders that I would want. Vanano was someone that I thought about, but they didn't start the last game. Mitchell played, so I'm now a little bit worried about him. For the other slot, again, it probably doesn't really matter too much. For now, I'm just going to put Forster in, who a lot of people think is going to play both games, but obviously I'm not likely to need him. So I might not even go for him. I might just go for a 3.9 anyway, but we'll put Forster in. Sticking to Crystal Palace, I think Zaha, if he's fit, will probably be in as one of my midfielders. Again, Sheffield United, Southampton, just good fixtures. I don't need to keep telling you why I want these players. So Zaha in. Again, a bit of a punt. Is he? I don't even know if he is a punt anymore. Like 10 goals and 4 assists so far this season is pretty decent, especially when he missed this chunk of games here and a couple of games here. He's actually been doing fine. So I quite like the idea of Zaha. So he's in. I probably wouldn't go for more than 2 Crystal Palace players because although I quite like Benteke as a bit of a punt, there's also a lot of other forwards I like this week, and that's not even including the likes of Kane. So yeah, I'm just going to keep building as I go and then see if I've got enough money, basically. So up front, again, looking at West Ham defence, how they're playing right now, and Villa defence, I think I prefer, because he doesn't have to play Man United, so I think I prefer Calvert-Lewin over Watkins. So if I've got enough money, so we'll see at the end. So that's another player in there. For Leicester, I think without Liverpool having a double, I'd probably stick with Jamie Vardy. I know there's a little bit of concern over whether he can play both games, but they are trying to chase top 4. He also played both the games in the last double. I know they have FA Cup to come, but I just think he's probably going to play both. Like he'll have had a rest before the Newcastle game, and it's 5 days to the Man United game. I think he just plays both. And he's still somewhat of a differential in the top 10k. I think last week when I had him in my normal team, it was around 30% effective ownership. And I don't see many non-free hit teams bringing him in this week because then he's got the blank. So I'm probably going to stick with him. And I'm probably going to have to go with Iheanacho as well. Because he's only 6.1 million. And obviously he's doing so well at the moment. Yes, that Man United game isn't easy. But could I see Man United keeping a clean sheet? Possibly. But if Leicester nick a goal, it's going to be one of these two. And obviously they got the Newcastle game before that. So they're probably both in. And I think as things stand, if I'm trying to think of defenders to go for, I mean, I'm kind of discounting Chelsea, Man City away and Arsenal at home. But their defenders could be quite good. But my main issue is which ones are going to play twice. Christensen, I just don't think I'd put him in my team. Plus, you kind of want attacking defenders as well for free hit, I think. Because these aren't players you're going to have to keep for a long time. So you want to punt on them getting that big, huge score in the week that you bring them in. Obviously, there's no guarantee, but you're taking that gamble that it happens. So I think triple Leicester would be on. I think I would go for Castagna. Filling in the other defensive spots again. I'm just looking here just to double check the fixtures so I don't forget them. I think I'd probably go Luca Dean. Now, I'm not dead set on this one, and I will go through who we could swap them out for in a minute. Because I do think the attacks they're playing are quite good, but he in himself is attacking. So a bit like I talked about with Martinez, if he could get one clean sheet plus some attacking returns, I think he would be in. Filling out the rest of the spots is a little bit potentially easier. I would probably, without Liverpool having a double up on Man United. So that would be Fernandes +1. Now, whether that's Rashford or Greenwood is going to depend on the Europa League on Thursday, because Man United have now had a big rest because of no Liverpool, depending on when that gets rearranged. And then the Roma game, they're already 6-2 up. So we could see some players miss out completely and some players come off at like 50, 60 minutes if the game is completely tied up, which it pretty much already is. And those players that have their minutes managed and stuff like that, they will be in my team. And I think Fernandes has to come in for me. And right now, I'd probably go Rashford over Greenwood, only because Rashford always starts. But Greenwood did get a rest in the Europa League. He obviously hasn't played against Liverpool now as well. So if he doesn't start in the next Europa League game, he'd probably come in instead because I'd be much more confident of him starting. For the fourth midfielder, it does get a little bit tougher. Like I'm looking at Villa, maybe El Ghazi, but really I want Grealish, but he's not fit. No one else from Palace. I don't really want to go for Everton midfielders. Sigurdsson, I wouldn't trust James Rodriguez to start both. And then you've got Chelsea. Could go for Havertz. Will he start both? One of the games is Man City. That's really tough. Arsenal, I'm a little bit worried about their minutes being managed, right? Rotation. So I would probably stick with Liverpool, whether they double or not, and just go for Salah because he is playing West Brom. Okay, sorry, not West Brom. He is playing Southampton this week. Either way, so he's in, and then I only need one more defender, right? So if we want to stick to double game week players, which I probably do, then I'm probably looking at Chelsea or Man United. Could Man United get a clean sheet against either Villa or Leicester? The potential's there. Again, I would definitely double check the Europa League just to see if Shaw plays or if he gets a bit of a break. And then you've got to fill in these spots for 13.5 million. So you can easily do that, right? If you wanted to go really cheap. But you don't necessarily have to. Like for Arsenal having a double game, you could go Smith Rowe, for example. and then you'd have 9.3 million to spend on the other 2 slots. So you could spend 4.5 million twice. I'm not going to go into those spots for now, but I think my team without Liverpool doubling would look something like that. I'd still have Salah in. The key players that are missing are Trent, another Liverpool player like Jota or Robertson. Obviously, no Spurs either. They're playing Leeds. Bale looks really good. Kane's obviously brilliant. So is Son. But I think if I'm going to get one non-double gaming player, it's probably going to be Salah against Southampton. One of the reasons for that is if I put Kane in, then I lose one of my Leicester attackers or Calvert-Lewin, and there's no one from those teams that I'd want in midfield instead. Like, I'd rather have Salah and Vardy or Salah and Iheanacho than Kane and Maddison. So something like that is probably where I would look. Now, obviously, there's swaps you could make, right? You could bring in Martinez for Guaita, like I spoke about, or Pickford, etc. But I think primarily, I kind of like that team, and I don't see my main team being different. Like, we could bring Everton attackers in here. So, for example, Sigurdsson for Villa and West Ham. So Calvert-Lewin, Sigurdsson, and Luca Dean. If I was going to go for a different defender, I think Luca Dean possibly be the one that I take out first, and I'd possibly look at Chelsea like Azpilicueta. But playing Man City, I'm not exactly happy about that. And I think it is difficult to fit anyone else in, like Vestergaard, for example, Konza, but they haven't got great fixtures. And with these boys, you're getting good defensive opportunities plus good attacking potential as well. Obviously, like I said, Rashford could become Greenwood. That's all going to depend on your own preference. But the key really is to Kane or not, right? So if I took out Vardy, for example, I'd have to make up money elsewhere. So let me take out Vardy for Kane. Just put him in a sec. And then we'll do the Liverpool draft in a sec. So then I've got only 8.2. So they'd have to be, both of them would have to be £4 million defenders, or I'd have to downgrade Rashford to Greenwood. Now, the decision about whether or not you need a bench is debatable. Really, in a double game week, when you've got pretty much only double game week players, it's very unlikely that you're going to have a player that misses both games. If you think that's a possibility, maybe rethink why you're picking that player. Obviously, there could be more protests and stuff like that, possibly stopping Man United Liverpool games. We'll have to wait and see. But that is kind of how I would set up. Let's talk about how I do it with Liverpool. So I won't take quite as long on this, because to be honest, most of the players would probably be very similar, and obviously a lot of this is going to depend on how much cash you've got to spend. But if Liverpool had a double in 35, there is no way that I would go without 3 for Southampton at home, West Brom away. Now, the key question is, do you go for double attack or double defence? And originally, I've been talking to people on Twitter about this. I was thinking about going for Salah and Mane, but on reflection, there's a couple of things that does. So one, by the way, I like Mane. I know people don't like that he hasn't been scoring much this year, but his stats are looking great. And I feel like he has been a bit unlucky. He's in this big, bad finishing slump. I'm sure he's going to get out of it at some point. So for me, that's not a worry. The problem is, how guaranteed are his minutes? Like he, Jota, Firmino, and even Salah to a certain extent could be rotated for one of the games, although they've got nothing else to play for. So that will come into my thinking. If I go for Mane, it would then probably be very difficult to get Jamie Vardy as well. Now, you might say Jamie Vardy's not needed, okay, he's not been as good as Iheanacho, etc. And that Man United game is tricky. But what you get with Vardy is nailed on-ness, 90 minutes, pretty much. If they're ahead by a lot, okay, he could be sacrificed. And penalties as well. So maybe it's better to go for Trent Alexander-Arnold and Robertson. And to be honest, when I was doing the previous tinkering, when I was talking about defenders, outside of the ones that I first spoke about, so Castagna, Luca Dean, Shaw, there isn't necessarily a huge amount of options. So I actually think I would probably be swayed to go Robertson and Trent. Like I would definitely have Trent, right? So in my Liverpool draft, Trent and Salah are straight in. First players on the team sheet, no questions asked. But let's put Robertson in there. Again, we'll go back to Crystal Palace. We'll put Guaita in and Zaha. Then up front, I'm going to stick to the 2 Leicester boys that I spoke about before. So we're going to put in Vardy, we're going to put in Iheanacho, and we're going to put Calvert-Lewin back in, because I don't think, like I said, I don't think it makes a huge amount of difference. It's mostly the defence that this changes, because I already had Salah in my non-Liverpool team anyway. Up front, it'll be Calvert-Lewin. Let's see if I can afford this. This is where it'll get tricky. This is where I'll probably have to have Greenwood, because I don't think I can afford Rashford as well. Arsenal, we would just put in Smith Rowe. I think there's a 4.1 million midfielder. We might have to think about him. I'll just put the keeper as 3.9. So one other defender. Let's just say Luke Shaw for now. Yeah, 6.8. So something has to give here. It probably has to be Rashford or Fernandes. Again, I'll keep an eye on the Roma game before I do it. Jamie Vardy could go, but I think having him and Robertson is probably better than Mane and whatever. I mean, the other strikers that I would go for double game week is probably Watkins, but he plays Man United. I'm just not sure about that. Benteke is a punt. I'm just not confident on the other striker situation. So Rashford will probably have to go to Greenwood. And then you'd have 2 dud defenders, right? So, I mean, I could go for Konza, actually, is probably as one of these. Let me just get Villa on. Konza, and then 4.6 to spend. So I'm trying to think off the top of my head who's 4.6 that's got a double. They'd be on the bench anyway, so it doesn't matter. Southampton have got Stevens. He played the last game. I saw that. I'm trying to think now. 4.6. Who starts for 4.6? Holding, maybe, if Luiz is out. But either way, I'm not expecting these players to play, right? So Holding would just go in. And Greenwood's the biggest sacrifice. But I've got Robertson and Trent potentially against Southampton and West Brom. I think that looks pretty good. Shaw could be Castagna. Shaw could be Luca Dean instead. But I don't think I could stretch to 6.1 million with this team. So these are the players that will be on the bench. So Holding, Forster or the 3.9 goalie, Holding, Konza, and Smith Rowe, wherever he is. So the main 11 would be this: Guaita, Shaw, Robertson, Trent, Greenwood, Fernandes, Zaha, Salah, Vardy, Iheanacho, Calvert-Lewin. Job done. I think if Liverpool have a double, that's what I would go for. I won't go into too much more detail because, like I said, I've just explained a lot of it in the first draft. But obviously, other players, you could go for El Ghazi if you're really stuck for cash. He's on penalties, and he will have Man United and Everton. He could be an option. I think he started the last 2 games, 2 goals as well. So if you're stuck for cash, he could be an option as well. Traore possibly to a lesser extent, but El Ghazi is cheaper. And he's on penalties, so it kind of makes sense that he's the one to go for, right? And I'm just quickly looking at the list. I'm not trying to prolong this any longer. Just see if there's any players that I've missed. Like Southampton, Che Adams. I don't like him versus the other options. Plus, he's playing Liverpool. And Arsenal, I just think it'll be rotation. You could go for someone like Lacazette for the West Brom game, but then the Chelsea game is difficult. And Chelsea just don't seem worth it to me. So, yeah, I think this is basically the draft that I would go for. Similar to this anyway for Liverpool. Like I said, in the team selection video, I will try and narrow it down a little bit. There we go. That is it for this one. Hopefully it was useful. If it was, please do give it a like and hit that subscribe button if you're new around here. Hopefully I've covered every eventuality in terms of potential rearrangements for Liverpool. Obviously, what we know right now is there's 8 teams doubling, hence the first lot of tinkering, but we've talked about Liverpool as well. If that gets put into a different week, well, then the whole thing changes completely anyway, and you know what? There'll be another video about that as well. Tomorrow I should have 2 more out for you, hopefully transfer tips and game week preview, but we'll see how things go. Really, ideally, I need an announcement before we start making too many more videos, but yeah, let's see what happens. Last week it was late. Let's hope it's a bit earlier this week. One last thing, if you haven't already signed up to Patreon or checked it out, there's a link in the description below. Everybody that signs up goes up on the wall. So thank you very much to everyone that already has. I'll be looking to try and make some improvements to that next year as well. Should have a little bit more time. And a big shout out to Shane C, Ott R, O'Neill Z, Eric, or is that O'Neill Z? Eric H, Mark, and Sajid K, all new Patreons since the last time I did the shout out. So thank you very much. If I've butchered any names, I do apologise. But yeah, I'll leave it there. I'll be back tomorrow morning with another video. So give it a like on this one, hit that subscribe button if you're new around here, and hit the notification bell. And I'll see you then.